So do you ever wish that you had the strength to stand up for what you believe in? Sometimes I think if I had a name like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, maybe I would feel destined for history and stand up. Maybe if I had 2 friends willing to stand with me, that would help. So I was preparing for worship, and when I prepare, I never cease to be amazed about what there is to learn. So one of the resources I utilize is a resource called Working Preacher. Anyone can get online and take a look. It often opens my eyes. So Corinne Calvillo shared the following. While the book is set during the Babylonian exile, it was written down in a period of Greek colonization some 400 years later. It is a book not interested in presenting a historical account of the Babylonian exile. It contains several historical inaccuracies, not the least of which is the fact that the Babylonians did not force their religion on others. I didn't know that. Instead, the book explores the vulnerability of people living under a religiously oppressive regime, a situation that fits the time of the Greek overlord. So the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego represents the choices faced by those who must either support an oppressive regime or face certain death. Juliana Casella then explains that in Daniel 1, we learn that the names Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had been changed from these individuals' birth names. Their birth names had significance in pointing to their religious heritage, because their original names meant God is gracious. Who can be like God? And God keeps him. Their new names pointed to the rulers. For example, Abednego means servant of the Babylonian god Nego. So not only were they threatened because they wouldn't worship this golden god, but their names had already been changed to wipe away what they believed and to make them be called names that related to these false gods. So whether you read the story as written as a Babylonian story of the Jews in exile, or you read the story as the Greeks that came into this land and took over the people who were there and made them have the religion that the Greeks had, either way, this is a hard story to read. And it's atrocity. Either way. The Jews are treated as if they're ignorant. They're treated as if they're not worthy of their opinions or their traditions or their religious beliefs. They are treated as if they can't even keep their very own names. While the story tells us that the 3 men survived the furnace, it doesn't tell us about the whole ordeal. Like, what was it like for those who cared for the 3 men? Did their family members quietly say to them, just bow to the gods, just pretend and live so we can still be a family? What was it like to live in a community where they weren't welcomed? Who they were and what they were wasn't allowed. Had they already witnessed other Jews and outsiders treated like this or worse? And I kind of wonder, had there been people who had turned them in? Did these rulers get other Jews to be the watchdogs of sorts? Okay, I have to admit, I love saying the names Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego because there's a Sunday school song I learned with their names. I can't sing the rest of it, but those names, I'll have to talk to you after church. Those names just ring. But then hearing the story again puts a weight on me. You may understand this weight. My very small experience of being an outsider, I think we've all had one of those experiences of being an outsider, those experiences just don't compare to the experience of others. You see, I have not been afraid to be caught by the authorities just because I don't worship the same God as the prominent culture. I am not afraid to proclaim or say things that I believe, even if it's different than what others think or believe. Sometimes I think my husband wishes it was the other way, but I have not had to face decisions between betraying who I am and death. The weight of the story is not from my experience of being threatened. The weight of the story is that I have done nothing to stand up for those who are threatened by dominant power. Okay, I really have a hard time saying nothing. I really wish I could say I've done very little, but I've done nothing. In fact, I take a little bit of liberty in the fact that I'm not here every Sunday, because when you're at a church every Sunday, sometimes you get a little uncomfortable and it's hard to talk about heavy things. I have 2 stories to share with you that just happened in the past few weeks that made me think a little bit differently about this story today. So Pat, my husband, and I were recently touring a museum, and one of the workers was so excited about the museum and other museums it was connected to that she began to share stories with us and her insight and her knowledge. It was a very interesting conversation. She had worked there for several years, and she was somewhere in her mid-20s, I believe. Well, at some point in the conversation, the subject changed. And she shared that she was an immigrant. She had grown up and attended school in the United States. And then she shared that she now carries around with her every single day, wherever she goes, her visa and her green card. Never before has she been in fear that she could be taken away if she didn't have those documents on her all the time. She talked about how she knows many immigrants who are filled with fear. Now remember, she has a visa and a green card, which means that she is documented. She is here legally because she has those documents. She also told me that in this museum where she works, others who work there have had people come up to her and say, "Go home," without even asking if they have a visa or a green card, or maybe they were born there, and like my parents, my husband's grandparents were taught a language growing up. They had German in their homes and in their schools till they were older. You don't always know by how someone looks or sounds. It weighs on me. So I told her to please tell her friends that there are others who do say they're welcome here. A second story. We were looking for something to do, and we enjoy touring old homes. And we found information about an old home, and it was decorated especially for Christmas. This home, unlike many historic homes, is owned by a couple, and since the beginning of their remodeling of this home, they regularly open up the home to the community to learn about the history and see the grandeur in this home that, like many older homes, had become deteriorated over the years. Each room had a nativity set. Each room, there was meaning of Christmas woven in. Not just by its decorations, but about what the decorations meant historically for different people and populations. Things like the nutcrackers were typically given by Germans as a gift to those who would come and visit. The guide said from the very beginning and throughout the tour that the owners want you to feel welcome. So if you need to, go ahead and sit on the furniture. Which if you've ever toured a historic place, you'd be like, really? We can touch something and sit? Which I understand why you want to preserve historic things. They said, in fact, when we're touring the bedrooms, if you need to sit down and sit on a bed, that's okay. The people who own this house want to share their home with you out of their gratitude for what they have been able to receive in their lifetime and to share with you. The owners showed up on our tour, and he shared that after growing up with his family in a small apartment the size of one of the rooms, and I think it was probably about this size, and after the fact that he had worked since he was 7 because that's how poor their family was, he said, I am just amazed that I live here. He said, and I work to live out my life with gratitude, and that's why we open up our home. He just had a grin, and he was so excited. Throughout the tour, there were little notes around that said, love more, celebrate each day. I mean, really thoughtful messages. And they wanted people to have a wonderful Christmas and kept sharing messages of blessings for the next year. Now, I've been to lots of Christmas events, but this one was about a meaning, and it was truly a blessing for me. Now, what makes me think a little differently after this story is that the owners were a gay couple. And I had to think, how many times were they treated maybe rudely or worse because they were gay? And here they are, welcoming everyone into their home and sharing their faith with everyone who came. It was not just a tour. It was a Christmas experience of receiving gratitude from another. So I have this weight. I know that I must speak up more clearly about who I believe Christ is. And it won't be perfectly, because there's no perfect way to truly understand who God is for myself and who I believe God is for others. We have to keep working at it. Just like the ones we love, we tell them that we love them over and over, right? Okay, there's jokes about, I told you once in the day I was married, do I need to ever tell you again? But we don't do that. We say, I love you by our actions and our words and our deeds. And so when it comes to understanding who God is, we have to work on it over and over. There are times when those who are publicly announced as Christians use their faith as a way to declare that they are the good ones and others are clearly the bad ones. Christ didn't come to provide membership cards to declare who's good enough to get in. Christ came because no one was good enough. Christ came because we need forgiveness. We need God who can help us to change our views, to open our eyes, to open our mouths, to change how we think, to continue to work on treating our family, our friends, our neighbors, and strangers with kindness and grace. You see, if you don't need anything, you don't need anything, right? You don't go to your neighbor's house and ask for sugar if you have sugar at home, right? You don't ask somebody to teach you how to do something if you already know how to do it, right? So if people could do everything correctly in the world and always live without hurting anyone or being completely separated from any sinful word or act or thought or deed, then we would not need Christ, right? I believe that there's another voice of Christianity, one that follows what Martin Luther says as he explains the commandment of do not gossip. Martin Luther continues with that by saying, we ought to speak well of our neighbor, defend them, and describe their actions in the best possible light. Don't lump all people into one category. If they have tattoos or accents or from another country or are from Wisconsin, maybe they worship differently, maybe they're even from Iowa, because they don't necessarily know when the Vikings or Packers play, they're not all terrible people. Just like Christians are not all terrible just because some Christians abuse children or murder or steal or lie. If you have not met a person face to face, you likely do not fully know who they are or what they've been through. It doesn't mean that actions that people do don't make a difference. Absolutely. What people do makes a difference, and it helps us to know where they're at in their life. But to fully assume that we know how they got there or where they're going, that's where we can get caught in the membership card game. Of all people, Christians ought to know clearly that Christians are not perfect or even holier than others. Christians, by saying that you are a Christian, you are proclaiming that you need a God who forgives you and helps you. You are proclaiming that you have shortcomings. You are proclaiming that you have sins. This Christmas season, I will continue to deal with this weight of seeing how I can share Christ beyond a greeting to those I know, Merry Christmas, which is still important. And I'm going to look for how I can speak and act of Christ's love. I'm not ready to open my home to the community, but what can I do in my actions to show Christ's love? Can I speak directly to someone who's upset with something I've said instead of whisper? Can I assume that someone who is whispering is maybe thinking about a friend who is ill or is thinking about something they had forgotten the day before? I will listen to know if my actions or lack of actions speak about God's love. And I will look and listen to see the models around me of those who truly believe and gratitude for what God has given them because they know they need Christ. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Sometimes I wish I could stand up like that. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. What is it really like to be an outsider? Amen.